Hello, it's Philip Cargom. It's lovely to see you here, and Happy New Year to you. It's Tea with a Druid 55, and when you've arrived, do say you're here, say where you're from, and then I'll know that it's all working correctly here. So I hope you had a really good holiday. Richard, hello, nice to see you. Andre from the Netherlands, great, lovely to see you. And I can see people are piling into the clearing in the forest now. It's wonderful. There are already 50 of us, 55, all gathering around. That's fantastic. Vivian, Suzanne, Katie, Richard, fantastic. So I hope you had a good break over the holidays. And what I wanted to talk about with you and share with you was this interesting time we're in now. You know, as Druids, we're very interested in time. The eightfold wheel of the year, the festivals, allows us to really engage with time intensely, and also to step out of time too, because part of the spiritual quest, I think, deals with the malleable nature of time. And I don't know if you have this impression, tell me, but it's as if the story stops. Your usual story that you are in for most of the year stops around Christmas, and suddenly the story changes. And the routine changes, you do different things, and it can be quite a long time between, and certainly for Druids who extend their period from the winter solstice, and that tends to go right through to the secular New Year. It's a long period of time. And now we're getting back into the old story, or perhaps the new story. And one of the things that interests me is the sorts of stories we focus on, because depending on the kind of story you focus on, depends your life and your consciousness, really, and your experience. And we're caught in these big stories at the moment, you know, Trump and all the things that are happening in America on that side of the Atlantic, Brexit on this side of the Atlantic, Bolsonaro in Brazil, down in the South America, and so on, these stories. And of course, they're important. It's important, I think, to keep up with them and to be aware of political events and what's happening, and the various social, economic, and economic issues that are involved. But of course, they're not the biggest story. And that's one of the tragedies of our time, really, is that the big story is the mass species extinction, climate change, the extraordinary period we're going through, which is so difficult. So that's the if you like, the big story. And then there are these smaller level stories that everybody is caught up in as if it's the only reality. The bigger reality dwarfs all these smaller stories, really. But I've got an idea or a suggestion for you, which is that spending too much time on the big stories leads to real problems and inhibits us from actually being of value in the world and to ourselves. To take as an example this wonderful man Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book about meaning and developed logotherapy and psychology. And his story was that he was in Auschwitz, and most of his family were killed in Auschwitz, and he noticed something about the way people who lost hope died, whereas people who were able to maintain hope were able to carry on. And he tells a story to he may have written about it, but I heard about it when I was in Paris, and Alfonso Caicedo's daughter was talking about how her father met Viktor Frankl. Caicedo was the founder of sophrology. And Frankl told him the story about how every day he would go out to do forced labor. And he had one shoe with a lace, and the other shoe, the lace had come off, and it was very uncomfortable for him to walk. But he couldn't ask for another lace. He was stuck with it. And he saw at some distance away a piece of wire about this long that he realized he could use as a shoelace. but he knew he couldn't break away from the column of people marching backwards and forwards to get this wire because he would have been kicked by the guards or whatever. So he had to wait for weeks until one day the column was walking by the wire and he could just bend down and pick it up. And then he could tie it into his shoe, and the shoe was tight and so more comfortable. So that's an example of a small story that he lived through. And while he lived through that small story, it gave him hope. If he was focused on the big picture, well, what's the big picture when you're in Auschwitz? Well, that it's hell. And so collapsing under the strain, the psychological strain of being in hell is totally understandable. But because he was able to move his focus, he was still aware of the horror of what was going on, but he was able to move his focus. He was able to survive. And so that's the sort of lesson I learned, perhaps, is maybe it's about not having a fixed focus camera. You know, the way we can maybe think that the only reality is portrayed on the news. You know, every night at 10 o'clock in the evening, we'll watch the news and it is telling us the way things are. And so our focus is fixed. Or, for example, we're in a terribly difficult family situation or relationship situation. Our focus is fixed on that. But of course, we know that actually there are many different levels of stories. And in fact, even if you go to what I was suggesting was the really big picture, which is species extinction. For those of us who follow a spiritual way, I'd suggest that most of us probably believe that there's an even bigger picture beyond that, which is that this physical reality is grounded and has its source in the non-physical level of reality. So that despite the difficulty we seem to be in, and without being in denial about all the environmental challenges we face, somehow we are able to root ourselves in a belief, a trust that life is fundamentally good, that consciousness, that deity, that spirit is the fundamental prime reality, and that worlds come and go. This world is going to come and go. We know that the sun will eat it all up at some stage. So we always knew this story would end anyway. It's just a question of what the time span is. But the spiritual worldview tells us that there is a bigger picture, another story, a deeper reality. And so, I mean, tell me if you find this helpful. I find it helpful because I worry, as I guess we all do, about the state of the world. I worry about the climate change and species extinction, and I worry about the political and social conditions and the warfare and refugees and all these things. But as well, I go to the small story in my own life, the small stories of love and beauty and connection and meaning. And I also go to what I believe is the biggest story of them all, which is the reality of the spiritual world. And that, I suppose, is how I keep sane, or at least stop feeling depressed. So let me know what you think of that. Let me know. I'd be really interested to hear your comments. And because this recording stays up a long time, you don't have to write right away. It's lovely. I'm just looking down the comments now. Suzanne saying we have to pay attention to the bigger picture. Right, and Ellie is joining us from, I believe, St. Lucia, which is great, where she's getting married, I think. Congratulations, if I've got it right, Ellie. So here's this suggestion, really, is that you've got the everyday stories that surround us in our human connections, in our gardens and with our animals, with life around us. Then there are the kind of middle range stories of the political ones and so on, social issues that we may or may not get involved in and help to be a force for the good in. Then there's this big story that the politicians, or some politicians, try to deny. And then finally, the perhaps what you might call the ultimate story. So let's Melissa from Brazil, this is exactly what I try to do, to connect from things that bring me down, like politics. Because of course in Brazil, it's a difficult, you're living through a difficult moment at the moment with the election of Bolsonaro. And then, does this play into the faith and placebo effect, asks Dean. Well, you see, the interesting thing about the placebo effect is that it's really proof that our minds can affect our bodies in a very real way, that mind over matter, if you like, that our beliefs change what's happening in our hormones and our neurotransmitters and our pain receptors and so on. So I think the importance on focusing on hope is very big, without being naive. It's not a question of, in the face of total disaster, pretending that everything's okay. But the power of hope, that's really what Frankl discovered. Because, of course, you could imagine a conversation in Auschwitz where Frankl is talking about how important it is to have hope and how you need to focus on the small things like the little piece of wire that he found. You can imagine somebody saying, "Are you crazy? Your relatives are being put into ovens and this place is just horrendous. And you're talking about this. This is so naive and stupid." But in fact, it's not, because, he went on to be one of, a great influence in the world of psychology, a great help, wrote some great books. And one of the things he used to do is he used to imagine himself, to keep himself sane while he was in Auschwitz. He would imagine he was standing up in front of the APA, the American Psychological Association, giving a speech about his theory about hope and the power of hope, and his observations in the camp of how hope could literally, physically keep people alive. And one day he found himself doing exactly that. So this is why I love sophrology, for instance, is because when Caicedo heard these stories, and when he started working in psychiatry in Spain in the 1960s, he discovered that if he was able to get people to travel forward in time and think hopefully about the future, this had such a positive effect on them. A better effect, a more immediate effect than getting them to rummage around in their past to try and untangle stuff. So let's do this now. Let's go into a small story in a small forest, which is near all of us. It's just a breath away. So let's do that now, if you're up for that. Let's have a meditation where we, just for a few minutes, just allow ourselves to become aware of this other story that we are living now, where by closing our eyes, we find ourselves in a clearing in the forest, the earth beneath us, the trees around us, and the sky above us. And we take in a deep breath, hold it for a moment, and then let it out slowly through the mouth, just allowing ourselves to relax completely. And you become aware of the ground beneath you. You sense all the life in the earth, all the creatures who are living in the soil, the rocks and minerals and crystals, the water, the spores, the mushrooms, all the things that live on and in the earth. And you feel how this earth is feeding you with a subtle energy that flows up into your being. And you move your attention now to the trees around you. And you can smell the perfume of the trees. And you breathe it deep into your lungs. And you feel the trees like your sisters, your brothers, your fellow companions on this earth. And they are acting as your guardians, your guides, protecting you and allowing you to breathe deeply. And you look up into their branches and you see their branches and their leaves, and you see the sky high above. And you breathe in the energy of the sky, breathing in its vitality, so that the energy of the sky meets the energy of the earth within the center of your being. And feeling at peace, sitting in this grove, you become aware of the story of this place. And you tune in to the rhythm, the pace of this story. This pace which is so much slower than our frenetic workaday world pace. This pace is slow. The slow growing of the trees. The slow changing of the soil. And you know that despite the slowness of this story, so much is happening. So much life is occurring in the soil, deep down, and even up towards the surface, and on the surface itself, with insects and animals scuttling around, with leaves decaying, composting into the earth, with shoots growing up. And you see an animal coming into the clearing now and taking a nut. Another animal nibbling a shoot. So there's plenty of life going on. There's a richness of life. It's as if there are 1,000 stories unfolding here. And you place one or both of your palms on the earth. And this might help you to connect with the rhythm of this story, with the pace of this story. You feel how placing your palm or palms on the ground helps you to slow down, helps you to tune in, helps you to sense the story of this place. And then you lift up your palm or the palms of your hands, and you bring those to your heart. And you allow that slowness, that calmness, that gentleness, but also that richness of life to be here in your heart too. May the story of my heart, of your heart, of all our hearts unfold beautifully at just the right pace in its own time, like a flower slowly and gently blossoming in the spring. May our lives be blessed. May all lives be blessed. May the earth be blessed. And you take in a breath, hold it for a moment, let that breath out, and slowly allow your awareness of the sacred grove to fade as you become aware of being fully present in your body, fully present here and now, seated in front of your computer or your TV or your phone or tablet, knowing you can return at any time to this clearing in the forest. So that was lovely to share that time with you and to slow down. And I hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow I'm off to New Zealand with Stephanie and Ema. We're going to a big gathering of Druids in New Zealand on the North Island, the south of the North Island. And lots of Australian members will be joining us. We'll be having a big gathering together, and it's going to be very exciting to be with you all. And so over the next 3 weeks, you're going to have 3 different guests, 3 surprise guests who will make themselves known to you. And they will try to master the technology, because these live video broadcasts can sometimes have a way of tripping one up if one isn't used to it. So do bear with that. And I'll be back. I'm just reading your comments here. Yes. I'll be back in 3 weeks, so 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks' time, I guess, I will see you all. And I hope you have a wonderful January. So I'll see you around the time of Imbolc, just after the festival of Imbolc, I think. So many, many blessings. Have a wonderful first month of the year. Okay, bye.